Welcome back, my DIY nomads. We are back again for another episode, and let's carry on with this tool series. Let's get right into it. Hopefully this is helping you out, and if you think of any cool tips that aren't included in this video, then please drop them in the comments below. Right, let's talk jigsaws. One of the more vital tools I think you need in your arsenal alongside a drill. An incredibly versatile saw to have. If we grab this corded Bosch jigsaw I have over here, I've had this for years now. Such a good little jigsaw, really affordable. This pendulum switch, this adds a pendulum motion to the blade that allows you to cut quicker, more efficiently through thicker material, and can increase the life of your blades. So a really useful little feature to have. If you lift up this point, that's how you unlock and lock in the blades. And on the foot plate here, this screw, if you loosen that, it allows you to adjust the angle of the foot plate, so you can cut up to 45 degrees on either side. But if we move on to this cordless Milwaukee one, this is the one we've been using a lot recently. Really nice to go cordless, really can, just so you don't need to be near a socket. But yeah, very, very nice jigsaw to have. Pendulum motion yet again. And the difference here is that the way that you lock the blades in and out is you slide this lever round rather than up and down, and I actually prefer that to the other version on the Bosch. A nice, really powerful system, and actually not too bulky. A little weighty in the hand, especially with that 5 amp hour battery, so maybe consider getting some smaller ones, but really easy adjustment for the angle on the foot plate. So you just slide this lever across, slide the foot plate forward, round to whatever notch angle. It's like some preset notches, so certain angles. Slide it back forwards once you get it in place, lever across, and you can start cutting away at different angles. So much faster than the Bosch there, but you are paying for that sort of bit more engineering really, but very useful. The hole at the back there, that's where you can add sort of extraction if you have like a Hoover or anything like that. A really nice powerful jigsaw there, and if you are using extraction, use this switch here, so you slide it back and then use your extraction, but when it's slid forward it opens up a vent on the side. You can see that opening there just next to the sticker, and that basically blows the sawdust out of there if you aren't using an extraction system. Another little tip I want to add in here is to improve how straight your cuts are with a jigsaw, using something very straight and true like a very thick ruler or this bit of aluminium extrusion like I've got here. You can use that, clamp it down, and use that to really improve the straightness of your cuts with a jigsaw, because this is one of the areas where obviously jigsaws are a little bit lacking, is their accuracy for straight cuts. So if you can't get a circular saw, that's a good way to improve your straight cuts. Right, let's show you the difference between an up-cutting blade on a jigsaw. You can see the teeth are pointing upwards, and a downward cutting blade where the teeth are pointing down. So we're going to first cut along this line, cross-cutting across the grain, so the grain is going this direction on this bit of plywood on the top veneer. So this is going to show up the most in regards tear out. Let's switch it over to a down cutting blade. Now for safety I would say if you're using cordless, just remove the battery just in case. Move a bit, swap it over, battery back in, and here we go. Obviously you might have seen my fingers quite close to the blade there. I wouldn't recommend you have them that close. But as you can see, we've got the down cutting blade here versus the up cutting, and it's a humongous difference in finish. So if this was my surface face, the face that I wanted to see, I'd obviously want to use a down cutting blade here because I'm going to get a much better finish. On the underside, it's torn out just as much as this is, but you're not going to see it. So definitely carry around both for both scenarios. Next up, I've got Multitool here. Can be incredibly useful in very particular tasks. It has loads of different heads that you can attach to it, cutting bits, sanding bits, and loads of different ones in those variations as well. But mainly I use it for cutting and very particular cuts. So another really useful situation to use something like a multi-tool is, I've had times when something's been attached to the wall and I just needed to cut a hole out, and maybe a square hole, or for instance, let's say like you've got a panel and you want to add a control panel to it and you need to cut a square hole. It might be a massive pain to remove that panel and then take it out and do the cutting there and then, but also sometimes the depth that a jigsaw cuts to isn't needed or wanted, and so just cutting out a square hole, rectangular hole, of something that's in situ, or you need to just cut down to a very certain depth into that, a multi-tool can be an absolute lifesaver. Now, I'm not going to talk about a table saw because it's a ridiculous bit of kit for a hobbyist or a DIY to actually have. Horrendously expensive in most cases, and takes up an incredible amount of space, and the least portable thing ever. But it leads me on to track saws. Right, we really are getting into some really top tier tools. This track saw, I ever since using track saws, it's changed the way that I can make and cut stuff. This is a cordless one from Makita. It uses two 18-volt batteries that run in series to make a 36-volt saw, which is very, very powerful. Really does keep up with corded versions. Obviously, you don't have to go cordless, but really nice to have that freedom when it is cordless. You can just make very fast, very accurate cuts from technically -1 up to 48 or 49 degrees, but really it's really between 0 and 45 degrees. You can make these very accurate cuts, and using the depth guide here, you can set accurate depth. The only issue with the depth guide on this one though is that it doesn't include the depth of the rail, so you do have to add on 3mm to whatever depth you set. If you can borrow one or get hold of one, really decent thing to add to your kit, but you don't need it. You can get away with a lot of stuff with that jigsaw. You just need to take your time and make more accurate cuts. I do feel like one thing we should do though is talk about brands. Every person out there doing DIY will have their preferences. They'll tell you why one of them that you have is rubbish, or they'll tell you why one of them is amazing. Really, I've experienced a lot of these tools: DeWalt, Makita, Milwaukee, Bosch, blah 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 blah. If you're doing it on a low intensity DIY setting, you can get away with getting the cheaper versions. I'm not saying go to wish.com and buy some £5 drill that they seem to have on sale, because that won't last you. But you can go into stuff like Milwaukee or Makita and you can get their more DIY based level tools. We've obviously gone for trade level. These Milwaukee M18 brushless fuel ones are the top, like one of the top level ones you can get at that voltage, and insanely powerful, like incredibly overpowered for a DIY. You don't need that much power, but obviously we use it a lot on prolonged amounts of time, and so we need the power to go through thicker materials and other random situations, so we do invest in it, but you don't need to get that level. Personally, if I'm just going to give you my 2 cents as someone that does it all the time, for me, Makita is my top dog. You can go to, I've also experienced Festool, which is absolutely delightful, but my god is it incredibly expensive. The reason I think really for me a toss-up is between Milwaukee and Makita, and I prefer Makita only because of their battery system. Their battery system is just so easy to do. Obviously, DeWalt has a very similar system to the Makita with this sort of front just uni button. Tool is very lightweight though, so it isn't quite as easy to do as this Makita from a heavy track saw. Actually, to be honest, this track saw isn't that heavy for what it is anyway. But yeah, I personally love the Makita system. I love it. I started on Makita. I got the Milwaukee. Look, this isn't an attack on Milwaukee. I don't want all the Milwaukee fan guys coming over here and having a go at me on the chat, but I got these, and then I started to want to transition back to Makita. Literally just because of that battery system. Nothing against the tools, they're incredible tools. But yeah, just get something for your price range, get something for your level of DIY. The other thing is, obviously, because we have got all this big bulky stuff, much harder to pack it all in one little toolbox. So sometimes if you're just doing the DIY stuff, having all the smaller, sort of less powerful stuff, you can fit a lot more in a lighter toolbox, which is quite nice, especially if you're going corded, because then you don't have to worry about all of the weight of these, although technically quite light, heavy and dense sort of batteries. Now, that is a ton of information to take in one video, and that's not even really scratching the surface of tools and stuff like that. So I totally get it. It's quite an overwhelming place. If you can find friends and talk to friends or other van builders, you can maybe even reach out to other random people in your area and ask if you can borrow some tools. I don't want to now start up a spout of crimes where some people are just stealing other people's tools. So be safe if you're either letting out your tools, or be careful with someone else's tools and make sure you return them in the same condition that you got them. But yeah, you don't necessarily have to buy stuff. I always try to encourage people not to buy new. If you can find used stuff or a friend that has it, that's going to help cut down like buying a tool that is just going to end up in a toolbox for years without being used. And also it just saves money. Another thing to consider is if you are not going to be using that tool a hell of a lot, probably best to also go corded, because batteries don't really like just being sat around not used. They're better being used semi-regularly to regular. Otherwise you can get problems with them and they just generally sort of start to deplete over time. I'm going to call it there because there's quite a lot of information to take in. Other than that, I'm going to call it a day. I'll catch you DIY Nomads next time.